Welcome to the Deal by Me podcast, where we invite guests to share their stories. Hello, I'm Dr. James W. Smith, your host. When you listen to any of the Deal by Me podcasts, please consider supporting us with a donation or a monthly contribution as low as $3. If you're viewing or listening to this podcast on YouTube, please subscribe. To all supporters, we say thank you. Be sure to check out my inspiring, encouraging, and transformative books available on Amazon. I am also available for speaking engagements, so feel free to contact me by way of Facebook, LinkedIn, or my website, www.dealbymepodcast.com. I have with me Jennifer Chase, who brings not just professional wisdom, but a deeply personal experience to one of the most complex and emotional challenges many families face, that is addiction. She is a certified life coach who specializes in helping the loved ones of addicts navigate the chaos, shame, and grief that often come with addiction. There is so much more to share about Jennifer, but I'm going to allow her that opportunity as we move forward in this interview. She is an awesome guest, and I'm so thankful and grateful to have her come and share with uh, listeners of this podcast. So, Jennifer, would you share with listeners just a little about yourself that I may not have mentioned and where you're located, and then we will move into the interview.
I would love to. I'll start off with where I'm located. I'm in Boise, Idaho, so clear over in the Pacific Northwest. And I've been here for about close to 40 years now. So I love it over here. So who am I? I am, that's a very complex question. I am the daughter of an alcoholic. I am the granddaughter of an alcoholic. I'm probably the great granddaughter of an alcoholic. A person who knew very on in her life that this was not going to be my journey, right? I was not going to become an addict. I was not going to do it like the other adults in my life. And unfortunately, in 2003, I was diagnosed with a hemorrhaging brain tumor that started me on my path to chronic pain, which is how I was introduced to opiates in the early 2000s, while the opioid epidemic was happening in our country. And so I struggled for a lot of years, 14 actually, with my own addiction. And um, the snapshot of that is that it was something that I thought I had control of, right? The thing that you need to understand about addiction, if you're listening to me right now and you're like, I don't know much about addiction, substance is never the problem, right? Substance was never my problem. It was not my dad's problem. Like, substance is not the problem. Substance is the solution to the problem. And when I was introduced to opiates in the early 2000s, I have a history of child abuse. I was sexually abused by my grandfather growing up, and a lot of things that kind of led me to finding my solution of substance. And so I became every bit of the adult and parent that I said that I wasn't going to be.
Hmm.
And then, unfortunately, in my son's senior year of high school, I found out that he had also become addicted to my opiates.
Oh, wow.
So, the chains and the effect of addiction is pretty rampant generationally in my family.
Well, Jennifer, I do want to say to you that I had a chance to read your profile and to just get a good feel for who you are as an individual. And it was very, very impactful and also very insightful. So let me just begin by just kind of saying this to you. Number one, I'm grateful that you chose to come on the Deal by Me podcast. We look for guests who have stories and can share from the heart uh, what you have gone through and what you are also doing. So I want to ask you this. You just talked about, your own relationship with your parents and how you've gotten involved. So when did you realize your own relationship with substances was a problem? And tell listeners what did early recovery look like for you?
Yeah, it took a while for me to know that there was the relationship was not good with substance because again, substance was the solution. And so it was the solution for a long time. I tell people this story. I was about 2 weeks out of brain surgery and I was laying in my bed and I could hear my family playing in the living room. And I said out loud, as though there were another 15 people sitting in that room with me, where the hell has this been my whole life? Like I had been looking for this something that made me feel okay, right? It made me feel like I was lovable, that it didn't matter that I had had the childhood that I had. And so for a long time substance was a solution and it took a tremendous amount of difficult situations to swing that pendulum for me to realize that this relationship had gotten very toxic and very bad.
Mm,
Um, I speak about when I was growing up and my dad used to drive drunk a lot and I would be in the back seat of the car praying that I was going to get home. And I turned into the mom that nearly killed my kids in the car, right? Like it had become very problematic, but it took a lot for me to get to the point that I started to even contemplate
mm,
living without substance. And the truth is, if I hadn't found out that I had inadvertently become my son's drug, like he was using my medicine, right? And so I think for me, understanding that connection that I had to my son's addiction is really when the pendulum started swinging, that the consequences started to outweigh the benefits. But that was 14 years in.
mm,
Um, and early recovery looked interesting for me because when I checked myself into an inpatient facility, I checked myself in the day after my son graduated from high school. And the goal was not abstinence. The goal was not recovery. The goal was, how do I start using like a gentle lady? How do I get my tolerance down? How do I get so many drugs out of the house so that my son isn't impacted by them? Like, how do I help my son without taking away this security blanket that I had found all those years ago? And what happened in that treatment facility is that well, first and foremost is that God met me in that facility, right?
mhm,
Um, and that I realized that the reason why I had chose substance was because of these difficult things that had happened to me in my childhood. And that if I was going to walk through this, I was going to have to find connection with other people because I became horribly isolated. And I was going to have to go inside of this cave. I don't know if you've ever heard Joseph Campbell's quote, which is, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." And I realized in that treatment facility that the treasure that I was seeking, this peace and serenity and joy and contentment and all of these things that I really wanted in my life, the only place I was going to get it was inside this cave. And the only way I was going to be able to survive what was inside of this very dark, scary cave was to bring, my tribe, my people that I was recovering with, and start dealing with the traumatic childhood that I had experienced. And so early recovery was wild.
okay, well, let me ask you this, because I'm understanding exactly what you're saying, because I sense, I've had a problem myself with gambling, so I'm kind of very familiar with where you are in this situation. So tell listeners, what are some of the biggest, misconceptions about addiction and families that you have, had to deal with, or that you had to unlearn. That maybe that's the best way to put it. Could you
Yeah.
just talk about that a little bit?
I would love to. So a lot of, and I think this is especially true in our society, right? Which is the misconception that they want to be an addict, that they could just stop if they wanted to. Uh, these ideas that we are purposefully doing harm. When in reality, and you speak to this, it doesn't matter if it's substance or gambling or sex or codependency, because it's also in this. It is a compulsive brain. Like we have compulsive thoughts, right? That become very difficult to break through. There's a dopamine problem. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are going on in our brain, but the very least of them is that I do this because I don't love my family or I don't care about them or I'm just selfish or right, like that's the very,
Mhm.
very, very bottom of the pendulum. What's happening is just this compulsive mindset that it's the intrusive thoughts that you can't stop.
So,
Uh,
so let me ask you this before you get too far, because you mentioned it already, the word codependency. So some
yeah.
people might want to really try to understand that. So how do you define it? And how can, loved ones of addicts, start healing from it? So could you kind of, you know, you seem to be dealing with it, but I want you to kind of define it for listeners so they can get a good feel for what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I want to define it not from a dictionary standpoint, but more from an experience standpoint. And
Okay.
codependency is this idea that I care more about somebody else's life than they do, right?
Hmm.
I want them to be better. I want them to succeed. I am so invested in this one person's life that is not my own that I'm actually not considering my own feelings anymore. And I am wanting it for them more than they are wanting it for themselves,
Oh,
right?
okay.
It's like I'm taking the leash of a dog. That's a bad example, but you
Mhm.
understand.
Yeah.
I'm leading this person down this path that I want them to go. And I'm having these compulsive thoughts, right? So if you're listening to me right now and you have a child that's an addict and you drive by their work 3 times to make sure that they're at work, or you wake them up and compulsively until they get up because you're so afraid that they're going to lose their job, or that you are, I mean, there's a million
Hmm.
examples of what
Hmm.
codependency is, but it really is the the sorry, I lost my train of thought there. It really is this compulsive thinking
Hmm.
that you might have had with gambling or I might have had with substance, and it's all rooted in fear, right?
Okay.
It's all rooted from this basis of fear.
Oh, that's interesting. Very, very interesting. So then what are some signs that someone is losing themselves and trying to save another person? You kind of alluded to that, but what are some
Yeah.
signs?
Yeah, I think some obvious signs are that you've lost all of your joy, right?
Oh, okay.
Your
Okay.
peace is so far gone, you don't even know if it's able to return. And let me just say it is able to return, but
Okay.
like there's no joy, you're not doing any of your hobbies. You're 100% focused from the moment you wake up till the moment you go to sleep about saving, and I'm using quotations for those of you that are just listening, but saving your loved one from this, right? That relationships become challenging, relationships with spouses, or let's say this is a child, like relationship with other children that you have.
Hmm.
Like overall, life is just really in a downward turn, and you feel responsible you feel responsible for getting your addicted loved one out of the situation that they're in. Like you're the only one that can do it.
Oh, wow. That's very, very that's very interesting. I want to just go back to something that you talked about earlier. That was your family. So I'm interested in knowing what did maybe addiction look like in your family growing up, and and uh, can I ask you this? And that is
Yeah, please.
how did it shape your identity, who
Yeah.
you are now?
Well, it did almost completely shape who I at least I would say who I was before I got sober. So my family is about four generations that I've been able to find, both down my mom's side and my dad's side, that are alcoholics. I had a grandma in the 50s that was an opiate addict and an aunt that were an opiate addict. But for the most part, it was all alcoholism. And again, I'm a statistic, and I think this is really important to talk about. I am a statistic that says one out of every three little girl and one out of every six little boy that's sort of raised in that dynamic is being sexually abused. And
Hmm.
I was being sexually abused by my mom's dad.
Okay.
And then the dynamic my family is, so I'm the youngest of three, and my brother and sister really got along with one another, but I was kind of always the odd man out, the annoying little sister. And I have a mom that was not my person, right? If my mom speaks English, I speak German. Like we just still to this day, we just don't communicate the same or feel the same. And my dad was absolutely my person, but my dad was an alcoholic. So
Hmm.
you never quite knew what you were going to get when he walks in the door at night, right? Like, and I think the other important thing to know about my family is my family came from a long line of pretty successful human beings, right? My
Okay.
dad was an international businessman and my grandfather was successful. And so it wasn't the typical people drink all day and then they can't get up for work,
Hmm.
right? Which was confusing for me because the world says that that's the way that, that person is
Hmm.
successful. Um, and so I grew up believing that I wasn't very lovable. I
Okay.
grew up that wasn't good enough. I wasn't lovable enough. I learned at a very age to start isolating because that felt like the safest place for me. And I carried that into my adulthood. I felt unlovable, and yet I was going to create this space for my children where they never experienced what I experienced. And of course, we know that didn't happen because
Hmm.
that's the way generational trauma happens, right?
Wow. Wow.
Um, that's the way we carry this thing on generationally. But
Mm.
uh, it for sure shaped who I was in a not so glamorous way.
Okay. Okay. You know, I'm just astonished by what you are doing and what you went through. Jennifer, my podcast is about encouraging, inspiring, and transforming. And I've always looked for uh, guests who have good stories. They've gone through something. It's like overcoming and defying odds. And I'm writing a book about that. Uh, and I never know who's listening to my podcast. I've got lots of people who say, "Oh, boy, I've enjoyed listening to that podcast," or somebody will say this or that. And so I want to ask you that if there are individuals out there who listen to this podcast who may have some of the same problems or situations that you have encountered, substance abuse, whatever that might be, whether it's gambling, alcoholism, drugs or whatever.
Yeah.
What would you say to them that's uh, would encourage them, hopefully inspire them, and maybe transform their life? Is there a word that you would give to them?
Hope, hope.
Okay, beautiful.
I would
Love
give
it.
them hope. I think that, most of us that struggle with some sort of compulsive thinking, we do it as, again, as a solution to something. And oftentimes that something is something traumatic that has happened in our life, right?
Mm,
And oftentimes that trauma comes at the hands of somebody else, right? Somebody has done something that has changed who we are and it has changed who we believe ourselves to be. And if you're listening to me right now and you're like, Jennifer, I don't know how you got out of that pit. Well, I got out of that pit by a couple of things I want to share with you. The first thing is find your people. Find the like-minded people that understand what you're going through. When I found other alcoholics and addicts, they already knew what shame felt like because they had it, right? And
mhm,
they knew that I wasn't who I was when I was using substance. And so finding the like-minded people around me allowed me to start being this authentic version of myself rather than who I thought the world needed to see.
Mm,
And so that's very important. And then the second one is we've got to deal with what's inside of our cave. And what I mean by what's inside of the cave is that's the stuff, right? That's the trauma. That's the experiences that led us to substance or gambling or sex or whatever it is. We've got to start dealing with the stuff that's inside of there. Because this is the thing, if somebody has created trauma upon you, they don't deserve to have this control over our lives anymore,
mm,
right?
mm.
Forgiveness was about setting myself free, not about if my grandfather or anyone else was alive that I would be breaking bread with them. I'm not breaking bread with them, but the day that I forgave them was the day that they no longer had control over my life. And if you're listening to me today, there is hope. There are people that can help you do it. And I know that it feels so huge and so like it's something that can't be accomplished, but it absolutely can.
Oh, wow. Well, listeners, don't go to place. This is an awesome conversation I'm having with Jennifer. So I want you to just hang on for a while as I ask Jennifer to share with you how you can learn a little bit more about her, uh, a website she might have, a book if she had want to share it and where you could get it, or anything that she thinks will be very helpful to you. So Jennifer, would you do that at this time?
Yeah, so I am in the process right now of writing my book. So I'll check back with you and send you updates.
Okay,
When that gets done. That's hard and exciting all at the same time.
I know.
But my website is www.rise addiction LC. LC stands for life coaching. So riseaddictionlc.com. And I've been told that if you don't put the www on there, my website's not working right. So make sure you put the www. Um, and on my website, there's an opportunity it says let's work together. But more importantly, when you click on that, it says connect or contact me. And if you're listening to me right now and you don't even know the first place to start, and maybe we're not even going to work together, I would love for you to contact me and I can be a resource for you in your community. I also work with people all over the states or all over the US. So please contact me if I can be a resource for you. I would love to be able to help. And then I'm on all the social media, and I can get you all of those links as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so very much. Maybe one or two more questions
Yeah.
that clients might want, that listeners might want to know. How do you help clients shift from guilt and control to self-trust and peace? Curious.
That's such a great question. I'm a quote girl, and my higher power a lot of the times talks to me through quotes. And when you asked me that question, one immediately came to my mind, and that was by Maya Angelou. And she says, "We do the very best until we know better. And
Ah,
when we know better, we do better."
mm,
And that's, I think, the way that we walk ourselves out of shame, right?
mm.
Is and guilt. And it's the fact that I think probably 95% of us really are doing the best that we can. And we just might not have the information to move us, right, in a different direction.
I love it.
Um, and I think once you have that information and that knowledge, you can ever so slightly start moving in that direction. And I think another important part about this is that perfection is not required. We aren't perfect beings. And so when we make mistakes, we acknowledge them, learn the lesson, and then start again.
All right. Well, let me ask you this last question because I thought it was a really interesting to hear you just talk about your experience as a daughter, an addict, a mother. So let me just put it this way. How has your experience as a daughter, your experience as an addict, and your experience as a mother shaped the way you show up for others today? I want to close with that one because I think it's something that listeners would love to know.
For about 6 years after I got sober, worked in the treatment field and I worked with the addicts getting sober, right? And I was in the
Mhm.
trenches with them and I loved every bit about that. But there was this pull that I was experiencing, and I know that pull to be God and my higher power.
Hmm.
Uh, that was like, Jennifer, we didn't walk through all of this, right? We didn't walk through you having a dad and a grandfather as an alcoholic and you finding substance and then walking through this with your son. We didn't walk through all of this for you not to be able to get into the trenches with moms and dads and,
Hmm.
wives and those people that are experiencing this. And the truth is, I feel very, very blessed and so much gratitude that I have this vast knowledge, if you will, of how addiction impacts all of these different relationships because I think, there are lots of resources for the addict that themselves that is trying to get sober, but there are so few resources for the family. And I think it has allowed me to show up for everybody that is impacted by addiction, not just the addict themselves. And for that, I am eternally grateful and so blessed. And if I were to have to choose between the most perfect childhood and the life that I have today, I'm choosing the life that I have today every single time.
Jennifer, you've been awesome. I've truly enjoyed the conversation and grateful that you chose to share with listeners of the Deal by Me podcast. It's been a joy. And again, I just want to thank you for sharing today. And there you have it. Jennifer Chase sharing with us today. And until next time, peace and blessings be with each of you.